Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Doctorate session of the Graduate Student and Alumni Experience Panel Series. This event is hosted by the Life After Your Degree program with McGill's University Advancement that provides events and programming for upper year students to connect, network, and learn from our McGill alumni. This panel series is presented in collaboration with Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies and the TRaCE McGill Project. This event will begin with a panel session moderated by Helen Martin. Helen is an aspiring clinician scientist currently pursuing a PhD in psychiatry and is the president of Graduate Student Association for Psychiatry. She holds a double master's in gender studies and in psychiatric social work from India, where she was awarded for academic excellence. Helen was later employed at the South Indian Region World Health Organization Collaborating Center for Mental Health Research and Training as a research assistant and a clinical case manager. Thank you, Helen, for being here and moderating tonight's panel. Before we begin, I'd like to ask you to please hold your questions for the Q&A portion of the panel after the panel session. And the panel session will feature 3 PhD alumni, followed by a session with current students and co-facilitators. With us tonight is the Dean of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies, Dr. Josephine Nalbantoglu. Thank you so much for being here with us. And without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Nalbantoglu to start us off with a few words.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. I know that we have very long days on video all the time. This is our new normal. And what also happens is that you don't run into each other. You're not talking in the corridors or on the way to the gym or on lower campus. So just to try to give you a little bit of that McGill experience, we've brought alumni who have had many years of that experience during their PhD so that they can talk to you about what it's like when we're all on campus, really energized and with all the buzz of students walking around. So I'm very pleased to be here. We've never done this before. So last night was the session that we did for master's students. And I was really blown away by what a good discussion we had. And the alumni were terrific, as were the current students and incoming students. I'm not going to be able to stay till the end today, but I really want to thank everyone for being here, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much. I even get applause from Gina. Thank you, Gina. If I didn't see your name, I wouldn't recognize you with the mask.
All right. So now we're moving on to the panelists. So like Antonia mentioned, we have 3 panelists today. So I'll introduce each of them. So the first panelist is Dr. Judy Prasad. So she's originally from Toronto, Canada. Dr. Prasad is now Kickstart Venture Services Operations and Program Manager at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. In this role, she supports the launch and growth of university startups and supports the operations of Kickstart Accelerator, the first dedicated wet lab space for early stage life science companies in Chapel Hill. Judy previously led the investor engagement, business development, and operations for Avinome Therapeutics, which is one of University of Chicago's founding biotech ventures. So she's got more than 10 years of academic and industry experience. She has worked with a number of government, academic, and industry-based stakeholders to create commercialization and research partnerships. Judy holds a doctorate in behavioral neuroscience from McGill University and is one of the global biotechnology revolution's top 100 leaders of tomorrow. So welcome, Dr. Judy Prasad. Maybe you can just wave a hi to all the participants. And our second panelist is Dr. Nathaniel Robichaud. So Dr. Nathaniel Robichaud spent 10 years studying the translation of mRNAs into protein, which is both in cancer and immune cells. He performed his PhD at McGill University under the supervision of Professor Nahum Sonebek, where he described how mRNA translation in both cancer cells and neutrophils can drive metastasis. So Nathaniel pursued his postdoctoral studies at New York University in the lab of Robert Schneider, where he studied the role of mRNA translation in the activation and differentiation of T cell subsets. Nathaniel's research has led to publication of 12 scientific articles and 3 book chapters, which has accumulated more than 1,600 citations thus far, as well as the launch of a clinical trial and the filing of a patent. So he also has written grants which total more than $5 million. In parallel, Nathaniel has developed knowledge in the commercialization of research, in obtaining certificates in scientific entrepreneurship from New York City and District 3. He has also been a consultant for startups, biotech companies, universities, and private foundations, so thereby helping them to align promising technology with useful indications and market opportunities. Dr. Nathaniel is currently the business development manager at Genome Quebec, where he develops partnerships between industry and academia and assists in their funding applications. So welcome, Dr. Nathaniel, and maybe perhaps you could also give a wave to our participants. And our third panelist would be Dr. Nicholas Dunn. So he received his
So I don't think
apologies.
Nicholas is here, but Lea Moss is here.
Okay. Apologies for that. So our next panelist is Dr. Lea Moss. So Dr. Lea Moss, PhD, currently holds the position of Senior Advisor to Vice Principal Health Affairs and Dean of the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences at McGill University. Dr. Moss plays an essential role in the advancement of the Office of the VP Dean and its strategic priorities to ensure a standard of excellence across the faculty, overseeing its governance. Dr. Moss completed her bachelor's degree in political science at Western University and her master's degree in education at Concordia University before earning her PhD from the Department of Integrated Studies in Education at McGill's Faculty of Education in 2007. Dr. Moss has published several papers on the topic of prior learning recognition and has received a number of awards, including the PROCEED, which is an Outstanding Achievement Award from the Provincial Organization of Continuing Education Directors in 2010, and the Canadian Recognizing Learning Award from the Canadian Association of Prior Learning Assessment in 2012. So welcome, Dr. Lea Moss. All right, so I hope all the panelists are ready, and I'm going to start asking all the wonderful and intriguing questions so that our attendees learn a lot from you. So my first question to you would be, tell us a little bit about your graduate experience at McGill. This could be anything with regard to something that you enjoyed the most or something that was really challenging for you when you were in graduate school. So either one of you could volunteer or I could pick a name.
Sure, maybe I'll get it going.
Okay.
Maybe topic in terms of relevance to current situation, the interactions with people, you know, are something that are just amazing during grad school. It's something that the number of people, the quality or the interesting nature of the people that you can meet, talk to, go out with, to have a beer with, you know, just hang out with, is amazing. And you won't necessarily find that kind of friendly vibe everywhere you go after grad school. You know, a lot of offices are corporate, you know, corporate structure, very professional. People tend to have families and do their own thing afterwards. So you don't get the people atmosphere of grad school when you leave. So that's a big pro for grad school.
Sorry.
Or Dr. Prasad, yes.
I'd be happy to talk a little bit about, for those of you that are just starting out, I was actually my PhD advisor's first PhD student, and that was extremely challenging, partially because we were building the lab together. That meant a lot of the work that I did was both to create an infrastructure within the laboratory and also build my own thesis. I did find it very rewarding because at the end I felt like I knew every part of the process, from writing up protocols to actually executing on the experiments. And I think grad school is one of the few times you actually have the independence and autonomy to be able to build out your own pipeline of thesis topics to work on. So I found that very rewarding, and I hope those of you that are considering grad school or are in your PhD program have the opportunity to do the same.
I'd like to echo that comment and say that the doctorate was my favorite of the degree, because there's no other time where you can have a question and it's your question and you're supported in this to find the answer to this question. And you may take your time, and there are some people around who are like, what year am I in? Am I in year 5? When did that happen? But it happens, and the benefits of what your PhD will bring to you at the end will exponentially pay off for you later on. So just keep at it, finish it, and enjoy the time that you're in it.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, when you leave academia, whatever your first job is, you're not going to have the freedom to do whatever you want. You're not going to be a decision maker. You will be doing whatever you're told, filling a job description. And so the freedom that you have now is awesome. And it's also unique in terms of learning now how to do anything that's presented to you. Learning how to do literally anything from scratch is going to be a huge benefit when you leave academia and do start in the workforce, because that is something that people who have not done PhDs do not know how to do. So you'll be way more flexible in what you can achieve and the types of roles you can have in a company or whatever position you're looking for, thanks to that ability to do anything coming from a PhD.
All right, like you mentioned, academic freedom is something that all three of you seem to have enjoyed. So that also has its price, right? So graduate school can be demanding too, right? So what advice would you like to give about managing work-life balance during graduate school?
So I was just going to say that, at least for me, the cohort I was part of in grad school was very small. In experimental psychology, there were very few of us doing any kind of experimental research. And this was specifically in behavioral neuroscience. So we really bonded as a cohort. And I think that it's important to create a community of other scientists who are in your year and beyond, who can support you. And this goes also for your committee. You want to know that the other people who are going to be evaluating you and giving you support during your thesis are there to provide guidance throughout the process, and not just every couple of months at your meetings. So I'd really recommend building a network of people you can reach out to for support and guidance, and not think that you have to go through graduate school alone, because a PhD can be very isolating. Particularly if you're spending all of your time in the lab doing 8-hour experiments, it can get pretty rough. So my advice when things get hard is to know that you have a network of other people within academia that you can rely on for advice and for guidance.
In terms of balancing work and life, my personal experience changed halfway through my PhD, because I started single, just doing whatever I wanted in the lab at whatever hours I wanted. It didn't matter if I stayed 12 hours. I'd watch a football game while I was pipetting at 9 p.m. It didn't bother anybody, and I enjoyed it. But then I got a kid, and you can't do that as easily. And so you do have to find something that works for you and keeps you sane, because it can last very long. My PhD was 8 years, and I know people who have done 10 years, and you can't sprint through that. So early on, if it's just, chilling while you're working, like watching something while you're pipetting or whatever it is type of work that you do, that's one way to keep it enjoyable. But if your schedule is more demanding, if you do have to separate work and life, you do have to learn how to do that. That was a very steep learning curve, but I had no choice. So there are absolutely ways to reorganize your time, figure out how you can be in the lab at hours that make sense, that you can be productive in a way that makes sense. And it's not all PIs are open to that. Not all PIs are good with family. But if you find one that is, or if you find ways to make it work anyway, it can be a really great experience.
I think that doctoral students are well positioned to understand what a lifelong learner is about. And as we are all, I'll just say, I think, lifelong learners, you shouldn't be shy to lean into needing to learn new skills at different points in your life. So it's not a weakness or a vulnerability in a bad sense at this point in your trajectory to do a time management course, or to take up something different that might help with increased stress level, or to reach out to some type of support group. Because the balance, there is no balance. And this isn't the pandemic talking. This is just life, and it's a juggle, and it's a fun juggle, and it's a wonderful juggle. Yeah, thinking back to needing to get things done, working at the same time as doing my doctorate, being 8.5 months pregnant and walking up the hill to the Faculty of Education building in the winter, of course. Why not? Bring it on. Okay, but that's the juggle, and that's okay. There were fewer things to help students manage time and manage relationships with their supervisors as there are now. So I would just strongly recommend taking advantage of the resources that exist.
That's definitely a great idea, Lea, because PIs are famous for being horrible managers. So if you can get help to manage some aspects outside of the lab, and you have access to these now, that's a really great thing to do. Yeah.
So drawing on the same line, you did mention about networking and taking support from people. So what advice would you like to give about working collaboratively with your supervisor? Because in graduate school, usually we have to closely work with our faculties, either at the research supervisor level, or if it is a non-thesis program, then at a project or at a professional development level. So what advice would you like to give about working closely or collaboratively with the supervisor?
Can I go first this time?
Absolutely, Dr. Moss.
So I think that doing a doctorate with a PI, with a supervisor, with your committee is a masterclass in learning how to set expectations. So that would be my top piece of advice, to ensure that everyone that you are working with has the same expectations. Everyone is on the same page. So you need to be able to find a way to do that. There are lots of ways to do it. You can put it in writing in bullet points. You can put it in a text. You can have a discussion and then follow that up later with something in writing. Whatever it is to ensure that you manage the expectations and that they're clear on both sides. And I think that really helps to build strong relationships and be able to then really lean into and know how you can, in the best sense of the word, take advantage of this working relationship that you have sometimes for, as Nathaniel said, what, 8 years, 10 years? What did you say? How long
8 years for me, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, 8 years. You have a 6-month-old, and in 8 years, that's going to be a very different relationship. I mean, that's really something. 8 years is a long time to be associated with a group of people, and there's a lot of great opportunities that can come from that.
I would just like to second that. I think one of the best phrases that I learned during my postdoc, actually, when they were teaching us on how we could best serve as mentors to those who would be working with us, is to, and this is similar in terms of phrasing, but to align the expectations with who you are working with. And so I think it was mentioned earlier that the academic experience, PIs are not trained to be managers. I think that's something that's actually changing now, and faculty perhaps have a bit more in terms of resources to help them guide through that process. But for many of us, especially if you're working with someone who hasn't had a lab for very long, understanding how to manage students, that's not something that comes naturally. And it's important to understand how they communicate with you before you begin the process of reaching out for guidance or asking for support. Understand if they're the kinds of mentors who expect you to only email within a certain range of hours during the day, or if they're available 24/7. I think it's important to know personality-wise who you're working with and figure out if that's someone that you can realistically see yourself having a good relationship. And if you realize this after you've already begun your thesis, that maybe you are not very well aligned, then it's a matter of communication between you and your mentor. And even if that can be extremely challenging, and I will admit, as the first PhD student in my lab, it was very challenging at times, it was important that we didn't lose sight of the goal, which is for both of you to get your degree. So I would definitely agree with Lea, say, from the beginning, understand what the expectations are for your thesis, what the time frame and milestones are for your thesis, and do your best to both be on the same team, because it really is to both of your advantage to understand what you need to graduate.
Yeah, that's bang on. I mean, if you don't mesh with your supervisor, it's going to be a long ride. And I lived that, not at the opposite experience. I was in a giant lab where many people were complaining about different aspects of the lab, but the negative sides I could handle, and the positive sides were exactly what I was looking for. And even though my PI was definitely not skilled at management, because it fit with my personality, it worked. And for the things that were there was a little bit more friction, then communication was key. And some people are intimidated by their supervisors, and you really have to find a way to overcome that. Because if you can't communicate with your supervisor, whatever's negative is going to keep being negative and get worse. And the positives that you could get out of it are not going to come on their own. You'll need to go and communicate to get them.
I see a lot of strategies and challenges that you have shared of your journey. So during your time, what services or resources did you find helpful to mitigate these challenges? And what do you wish you had known, especially when you first started graduate school?
So I actually didn't really engage, other than a couple of maybe career services seminars. I didn't engage much in the programming at McGill outside of what was within my department. And that could have just been a function of the time that I was a PhD student. I did lean heavily on the committee that I had and the network of other grad students to learn from in terms of how to work through my thesis and to graduate within the time frame that I had allotted for myself. And I think that that's now, because there are so many more resources at McGill, being able to expand your network, you know, to alumni, to others perhaps in the career that you are thinking of entering upon your graduation, that's something that's really invaluable. And I think that being able to create that network earlier than later is going to help you a lot when it comes time for you to find a job. So starting that process, you know, well before you graduate, that's one piece of advice I would give.
I concur with Judy. I had made a commitment to myself that when I started the PhD, I was going to lean into this degree fully. So I looked for places to connect. There weren't as many, but I was an organizer on our student-run conference that we did. Because I didn't find as many resources within McGill, I looked outside. At the time, I was the volunteer president of a provincial organization. And it was in finding that network and working at the same time and everything else that the network paid off. I don't know, the universe smiled on me because I was 6 months out of my defense, and someone from the Ministry of Education called the office of the Quebec Association for Adult Learning, of which I was the president, and asked our receptionist, do you know anyone in your entire network who knows anything about prior learning assessment? Because we're launching this program and we need someone. And she said, you know, that's funny. I just spoke to our president and she's doing her doctorate in it. Like, and she's the, I think, only one in Canada. Do you want to speak to her? They're like, are you serious? And literally that's what happened. If I had not made the commitment to try and find as many places to put my stake in the ground and take my place as what I was doing was important, the work that I was doing was going to contribute to something, and to start my network while I had the space of being a doctoral student, I'm not sure if that would have paid off. And that's where I transitioned to. That's why I did not go into academia. I was really lucky. I just slid right into running a provincial program. So that was good. So I hope that works for all of you.
Yeah, networking your way into something that will be of interest to you is way better than applying to jobs. It's just an easier foot in the door. You know, it doesn't guarantee you a position, doesn't guarantee you a job. You know, if you're terrible, you're terrible. But if you at least know somebody that can be like, oh yeah, take a look. You know, I'm going to invite him or her to an interview. It's a huge, huge benefit. And when I was doing my PhD, in my head, I was going to do academia all the way. Okay, I'm going to be a professor. I don't need these career services. That's what I'm going to do. And I was wrong. But I did work on my network. So at the time, what I was doing is I was trying to get as many connections with professors as I could. So I was at Thompson House all the time, drinking with PIs. That was my way to network. There's a whole bunch of other ones. You don't have to guzzle beer to network with PIs, but it's a good way. And that led into my postdoc at New York. And the postdoc in New York, the reason I went there was because I had access to entrepreneurship. So the PI that I was working with, he started an entrepreneurship program at NYU. He spun out like 6 or 7 companies out of his lab. And so that's what I wanted to learn how to do. And I wanted that skill, and I wanted to bring that as my skill to academia was the original plan. Now, that networking was all smooth and easy and worked out very well. But then when I had to apply to stuff, a lot harder, a lot harder. And I got really lucky that I did that entrepreneurship aspect, because that is what people wanted to, that is what got me a job. You know, that I had spent 8 years studying a very specific topic nobody cared about, but that I had some business acumen, that I could talk company lingo and scientist lingo. That got me a job really fast, actually.
Okay. So all these discussions nicely segue into my second part of questions for you. So these questions are around professional and career development. So we know that graduates usually go on to a wide variety of careers. So what options did you consider and how did you select your career path?
So for me, at least during undergrad, I had the opportunity to work for a preclinical contract research organization. And I think that experience is what led me to pursue a PhD. Up until that point, I had never really thought of becoming an academic, but I happened to work actually for a faculty spinout at the University of Toronto. And that seemed just so interesting to me. I also realized without a graduate degree, I wouldn't really be able to move beyond being a preclinical scientist, and I wanted to do more, maybe even one day run my own company. And so I think the ability to obviously create my own thesis, do experiments on my own as a PhD student, that was really nicely dovetailing into the idea of one day owning my own business. And it wasn't until actually during my postdoc, which I only considered doing because I still so loved the research that I had done as a PhD student, that I was able to really build out the network as well as take part in some of the career development services. This was at the University of Chicago, that led to my career, running a startup and spinning that out of the university. So I think what really matters in terms of your next steps and what your career opportunities look like is to think about not just what might be, very interesting at the time that you graduate. Because right now, when I speak to students who are leaving their PhDs, one thing I keep hearing is, I want to get a job in a VC firm. I want to do due diligence. I want to be an analyst. And it's understandable because those jobs are being promoted by those kinds of firms. They're looking for PhDs to enter the market. And that's fine, but just ask yourself, where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years? And does that align with the kinds of experiences that you are getting now? And if it's something that you think in the short term will benefit you, great. But just to keep in mind that, and I think this was something someone said earlier, we're all lifelong learners. So you will need to supplement whatever education you've had as a PhD student with other kinds of experiences that will help you as you move down in your career. And I just wanted to mention that a lot of scientists seem to be afraid of learning about business, or they think that they're somehow not qualified to learn some pretty simple concepts when it comes to what you might think an MBA does, and it being completely independent from what a researcher does. It really isn't. I think that anyone that gets a PhD knows how to teach themselves, and you shouldn't be afraid of doing and learning things that you are unfamiliar with, because you can teach yourself how to do anything. I think that's what a thesis really is. So that's just my 2 cents on career development.
Yeah, you're all going to be are becoming experts at learning. If you do a PhD, you're going to be better at learning any topic than anybody else. You'll pick up on business faster than anybody else. You'll pick up on clinical trials faster than anybody else. You'll pick up on writing faster than anybody else. You'll pick up on public speaking faster than anybody else. Whatever it is that interests you, get some experience and learn a bit about it, and it'll come a lot faster than you think it might.
I have to say, from thinking also that I was going to do the route of academia, and then pursuing it seriously, I taught at Concordia for 16 years part-time for their Department of Education. You then will get a feel of, were my expectations 5 years down the road and such realistic? For me, teaching part-time worked super well because it was a class here and there, usually in a condensed period in the summer when the tenured professors didn't want to teach, or undergraduate students who I adored teaching and they couldn't be bothered with. I'm rolling my eyes, but it's a different world. If you're going to commit to that, then your expectations need to be in line. So you need to know that you need to write grants and possibly run your own lab and commit to the tenure track. And at that point in my career trajectory, that was not where I wanted to go. I chose administration over that route consciously. I have no regrets, but it came with trying. And I took the experience from the doctorate and from everything that came along with that with me. So one of my core strengths, I think, is that I'm able to go through a tremendous amount of documentation quickly, rigorously, and accurately. It has served me extremely well.
In terms of your skills, whatever you happen to be good at now or enjoy now, develop those, because those are, if you're not going to be a PI, those are the skills and the interests and the expertise that are going to lead you into, at the very least, your first job, and probably, you know, several iterations thereof. Because everybody's got a PhD and a couple papers and nothing else, and that doesn't distinguish you from the 100 other applicants to any position. If you want to get selected, you need to have something that's relevant. So if you enjoy writing, find a way to write. If you're not writing papers and reviews, write a blog, write something. If you enjoy public speaking, if you want to explain science to the public, start doing that. There's lots of foundations that look for that. And I was involved with the I think it was the Cancer Research Society. I'm not sure. Some private foundation that was looking for PhDs to explain to the public, to patients, their friends and family, what research is happening right now. And if you want to go, if that's something that would interest you in a career, get started on that. If you want to go industry, find ways to get to get experience there. There's a Quebec government funded program, the Quebec Scientific Entrepreneurship Program, I think it's called. That's free, it's online, it's not that much effort, and that just gives you the basics of what it means to take science into commercialization. And even if you end up not going industry, it'll teach you about ways of thinking, about making your things, whatever you're doing, making it immediately useful, or doing the least amount of work for the most amount of impact. So whatever direction you think you want to go, find something now that you can just dabble in or get a little bit of experience in, because that's going to determine what kind of job you can land and how fast.
Yeah. So even before I could ask the questions, you beautifully took it to the next question about the skill sets. So I'll just reiterate the question right now. So what kind of skills did you develop or activities did you engage in during your graduate studies that sort of like helped you to prepare for your current career? This could be either or both with regard to co-curricular as well as like extracurriculars.
For me,
Nathaniel already finished his, so maybe.
I was going to say that honestly, as a PhD student, this was not something that I really did. And that was partially just because of the time commitment to finishing within, for me at least, a time frame that I had set for myself. I think during my postdoc, and it's something I would have done as a PhD student, provided the resources were there, I did take the opportunity to do internships, join clubs, shadow others that I thought had careers that would be of interest to me in the future. I think wherever you can find those resources, to take advantage of them, and they don't have to be within the university. One of the biggest advocates for you in terms of your career development will be mentors in organizations that you think you might want to work in one day. So setting up a time to have coffee with them, learn from them. People are very willing if you reach out to them, and it doesn't necessarily have to be through an introduction. Even if you just write something short on LinkedIn saying, I'm interested in what you do, would you have time to talk to me? You'd be surprised at the number of people that will respond, because for those of us that have PhDs and have left academia, we remember you because we were once in your position and we want to support you. So I personally, in my current job, try to find ways to support as many PhD students as I can, because I realize that there's a huge number of very qualified people out there who perhaps just don't have the skills that they need to leave and find something that they would find very rewarding outside of academia. And that's partially because they just don't know where to go. So I would agree with Nathaniel that the first thing is create a network, find the resources that can help you learn, and then take those advocates from those organizations you think you might want to work for and use them to figure out what you need to do next to make a career.
That is so eloquently said. So eloquent. Yes. If someone had been able to give me advice at the time with resources that exist now, they probably would have whispered in my ear, yeah, you should have a LinkedIn page and find out how to build it well, and have someone look at it and have some peers critique it and find your mentor and have them critique it. And that's okay. Critique isn't criticism. It can be very supportive. I would add that that attending a conference or two or many during your time as a doctoral student to just see who's out there, see different styles of presentation, building your network, reaching out to speakers and to participants after to build that list. No one with a good heart will say no to you to have a conversation by Zoom. We are all in this to support our graduate students, and so that sounds like I was set up for this, but you should lean into alumni services because they definitely can help you find the right people to be matched with. And it is truly, you are in a city within a city. That is what McGill is. McGill is a city within a city. It works like that. And so I strongly advise you to take advantage of being a citizen of this city and use the resources that are there for you. Oh, and if I could just say one more thing, and this sounds so old school, but when I was doing the doctorate, I kept my question on a cue card in front of my computer, and I would be working on it and reading. And then of course I had a brilliant idea, one of 10 brilliant ideas of that week. And what I would do is I would keep a notebook next to it to what I was doing. And when I would have the brilliant epiphany idea, I would look at the cue card and say, okay, does this relate directly to my research question? 10 times out of 10, it did not. So, but it wasn't a throwaway question. It went into the notebook that was next to it. And then afterwards, I had this long list of ideas that were tangents that I could then ask as questions to the network that I had built and find someone to talk to about this question that I had. And they were conversation starters. So they did help me in the end. Not for writing the doctorate, but for the networking.
Yeah, just add something. I like the what you just said, because it's something that you can do that is within your PhD, because some of you will be involved with PIs that will, push really hard for every single thing that you do to be thesis related, and that won't want you to be doing anything outside of that. But that is a type of thing that you can do that is relevant, that you can even discuss with your PI, and that can help build your network. And there's lots of other examples. My current position is help. One of the things I do is help teams apply for grants, and something that I happened to do as a PhD was review a ton of papers. I must have reviewed dozens, maybe even 100 papers in my time as a PhD, and that was relevant to my thesis. And so it was something that not only did my PI agree with, but it was basically he didn't want to do it and would give it to me. And it is a skill that I developed that is then useful after PhD. And if you can come up with ideas like that, it's a great way to get you aligned for a job. There's even funding that you can get for that. If you've ever heard of MyTax, they have programs where you work a certain amount of time with the company, certain amount of time in your lab on a joint project, and that will fund the to be able to work on a project that your PI is actually interested in.
Thank you. So my last question to you, to all three of you, is that what was your transition like from your after graduation to your first job, and what advice would you like to give to those who are just starting out their job search process right now?
Panicky would be the word I would use. It was a bit of a particular situation because I had gone to do a postdoc in New York, and as I went, my wife got a job opportunity in Montreal that she couldn't pass up, and so we had she's now 7, at the time she was 5, a 5-year-old daughter, and she came with me to New York, and my wife took her position in Montreal, and that didn't last very long. So, eventually I was just like, okay, it's not working. Panic to return to Montreal. I need a job now. So don't do that. If you plan things better, it's a good idea. I got lucky because I had skills that aligned with what my current position required. So the panic stage was very short. But that was how it felt.
That's very real, Nathaniel. Wow. That's very real. Yeah. Panic. I remember not being able to let go of my final copy to the GPS office. They had to pry it out of my hands. And then they handed me a pen, and I was very confused. And I said, what? And they said, it's a pen. Congratulations. I was like, okay, what do I do with it? You write with it. You write with it. So yeah, panic would also, maybe that's just a natural reaction to when you're done and you're going to do this big transition. But like I had said before, I was very fortunate. I was able to transition to work, and then it's recentering, I think, on where you're going to go and use your doctorate. The best piece of advice that I got was from my mother-in-law at the small party that we had for finishing the doctorate, because it was like a family affair at that point. And she turned to me, and by the way, I'm not being facetious. I love my mother-in-law. I actually call her mom. But she looked at me and said, now what? And I thought, yeah, now what? Yeah, now what? Okay. So I had this job that was a contract, and that's great. And I felt like a kid in a candy store because I was putting my doctorate to work. But I knew that that wasn't going to be a forever thing. So now what means that you have to envision reinventing yourself. You're no longer a doctorate candidate. You're no longer in somebody else's lab. You need to reinvent your identity and be prepared for that uncomfortable moment. That's okay. And again, try to lean into your network to help support that transition so that you can land on your feet moving forward in the direction that you want to go.
So for me, after graduating, I transitioned into a postdoc, and that was partly because at the time, I felt like I should give myself the opportunity to pursue a career in academia if I was able to get a faculty position within 5 years of training. So I set a goal for myself. And during that time, when I realized it was going to be unrealistic for me to meet the milestones I needed to meet to get an academic position as faculty, I changed my trajectory because I knew that at some point when I left, I wanted to do something that would be meaningful. So I had that time to explore like parallel pathways during my postdoc, which I'm grateful for. I think it's not very often that PhD students have the opportunity to do that, but if they can, they should. And because I was lucky enough to get to do that during my postdoc, I had the opportunity to network and find a first career that for me would give me the training I needed in startups and entrepreneurship and commercialization. But I did experience that moment of panicking in late 2019. It was not that long ago when my position was dissolved as an entrepreneur in residence and I was laid off. And it was the first time in my career that that had ever happened. I'd always had a position. I'd always knew what would happen next. And what that meant for me was that I had to relocate. I had to start looking for a job. And this was only a few months before we went completely virtual due to the pandemic. It was very hard, but I had a network here, and that was what really helped because people within the Research Triangle Park already knew who I was. I was able to tap into different opportunities within organizations I knew I would want to work for eventually. And so I think I was pretty lucky to have had that infrastructure built, but I had been planning that in advance, you know, just in the event that things didn't work out with that first position. So I guess my advice for anyone in terms of building their skill set with leaving academia is to just know that you've had a network that you can lean on for support when it comes time to finish your degree.
Okay, such valuable insights. Thank you so much. So we've come to the end of the panel discussion. I would like to open the floor right now to a few quick questions. We can have a question and answer session right now. So if any of the attendees have questions, you can either unmute yourself and ask the question directly, or you can send the questions in the chat box and we can discuss that. We will also have a larger Q&A session at the end because we do have another session now. So if there is...
I just want to say, like, don't be shy to ask questions, not just here, but in general. It's one of the best ways to meet people. If you're at a conference and you ask a question, people will come up to you and talk, and you can meet people just because you asked a question. And that's true within your university. If you're at a seminar, it's true if you're at a conference. It's true everywhere. It's a great way to meet people. So I highly encourage you to speak up and get known that way.
And another resource that you can access is, I think PGSS also offers this how to maximize your supervisor experience or your experiences with your supervisor or something like that for graduate students. So I attended that, and I attended that only in my third year. I wish I had attended that in my first year. So that really helped me to engage in a conversation with my supervisor. And also, just to give you a background, my supervisor, I feel like she is one of the most supporting supervisor that one could ever ask at McGill. So I call her my Wonder Woman. She's like incredibly amazing mentor, both personally as well as in my professional fronts. But that session really helped me to encounter like hard conversations with her. Yeah. All right. So if there are no other questions, I will ask Antonio to give final words.
Perfect. So that brings us to the end of our virtual event. I wanted to thank you all so much for being here. Helen, for being our moderator this evening, to our panelists, for sharing your McGill experiences and providing insights that will help our current students, and to our co-facilitators on sharing your current experiences now at McGill. I'd also like to thank Dr. Nalbantoglu. She had to leave a little earlier, but much. Very, very happy to see everyone here this evening. We will be sending out follow-up email, including the resources to our offices. There were some resources in the chat, so please be sure to mark those down and note them. And we'll also be sending a recording of this evening's session. Thank you everyone so much, and have a great evening.
Good luck with your PhDs, everyone.
Yep. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice
Good
seeing
luck,
you.
everyone.
Luck, everyone. Thank you.